Good morning. Now, I call myself an intercultural economist, or intercultural economist, was that it? Economist, but I used to be just an economist. But in recent years, I've become very, very interested in the ways that managers and employers have to deal with the changing demographics in the workplace. And I find that managers are using old methods of managing people that don't necessarily work anymore with the changing environment. I had my first lesson in the ways that different cultures can affect the outcomes of something, and sometimes you don't get what you intend, when I was a very little girl in Tripoli, Libya. And it was a much more peaceful place at that time. But my father was in the Navy, in the U.S. Navy, and he was from Boston. We were in Tripoli, Libya, and the thing that people do in Boston, the parents do, is they buy their kids a bike, because in the streets of Boston, you ride your bicycle down the street. It's something that kids do. They hang out in the streets. Now, he was following what I call a cultural norm. He was from Boston, doing what they do in Boston, but he was in Tripoli, Libya, and it didn't work. And so as a result, instead of my learning how to ride a bicycle, which was my father's wish, I wound up stuck in the sand. I actually didn't learn to ride a bicycle till I was 10 years old, not until after we actually returned to the States permanently. After we left Tripoli, we went to England, and I had my second set of intercultural lessons. I discovered this whole concept of cultural norms and behaviors that we all take for granted and we don't even realize that we're using. In England, the kids in the school didn't like my accent. They didn't like my attitude. They didn't trust me. And I want you to look for parallels in today's world, because I find this quite interesting. They didn't trust me because I was American. And they didn't trust me because I was American because the Americans had fought the Revolutionary War against the Brits and won. And therefore, I was suspect. I was stereotyped. Does that resonate with what's going on today? At the same time, I did really well at that school, and I think that the reason I did well was there was a teacher there. His name was Mr. Potter, probably the only teacher's name I have ever remembered. He was so significant to me because he taught me mathematics. He taught me to love mathematics. And I think that what happened is he saw something in me, a gifted student, instead of an outsider American. And so he reached out to me, and that made an impact on me and my future life. Now, what I learned from that experience was that there were several cultures going on, several sets of rules that people were following. There was my set of rules, my being American and probably from a military family, probably set me apart from the rest. The students in my classroom who were British, they had their own culture, but it was also the culture of the school, the organization, the environment in which we were interacting. I found that if I had not had Mr. Potter, I probably never would have been able to reach my potential. But just one person from the dominant culture stepping forward and reaching out to me made a real difference. Now, in Canada, you've heard all about the baby boomers. We're a big subject these days. We've been a big subject for many years. We are now retiring. We're getting old and we're retiring. So we're leaving the workforce, taking labor and skills with us. We're taking something else, though. We're taking something that is called tacit knowledge, that understanding of how things work around here. And that's a really tough thing to replace. You can replace bodies, you can replace skills, but tacit knowledge needs to be built. And that's a real tough thing to do because the labor force is shrinking in Canada. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not shrinking. It's the Canadian workforce that's shrinking, but the Canadian workforce is not shrinking. There are lots of immigrants coming to Canada, and they are replacing a lot of the people who are leaving the workforce. Now, the problem is, of course, if you come from a different culture, you come from a different set of behaviors and expectations, then you don't have the same tacit knowledge. You don't even have the base of tacit knowledge to replace somebody instantly. That needs to be built very, very carefully. Now, a few years ago, I did a study on the behavioral norms that managers use to manage their employees in Canada. And what we're trying to do is find out what they might be doing to limit their ability to integrate immigrants into the workplace, given the situation. We found that talent management was a huge issue, and in particular, engagement of employees, employee engagement, building trust, social capital, networking in the workplace is a significant problem. Fitting in is a problem. The second thing that was a huge problem was the ability to recognize and value the talents and skills and abilities of immigrants. Both of those areas are really affected by cultural differences, cultural norms and behaviors that are different. And managers need to learn how to manage people with intercultural understanding and sensitivity. Now, we know that from our project, we actually started telling people that, and then we started getting into discussions with people about that and how to motivate people to change. And I found that there were 3 areas of motivation that seems to come up over and over. The first 2 are necessary but not sufficient. That's an economics concept, if anybody is familiar with that. Necessary but not sufficient. The third one is the one that I think is the most important and most substantial, and that is an economics concept. The first is social justice, the second is legal compliance, and the third is self-interest. Social justice is necessary, but it's a problem because if you ask a business person to do the right thing, then they're going to tell you, well, okay, I'd love to, but what's in it for me? I've got a business to run here. Legal compliance and like employment equity and things like that, necessary but not sufficient, because what legal compliance does is drive people to meet a minimum. If I have students in my class and I tell them, okay, I want you to finish a paper by next week and I want at least 1,000 words in that paper, what's going to happen is about halfway through the paper, they're going to start counting the words. Okay? They're going to make sure they get at least 1,000 words in that paper, but not too many over. Because once they've met the requirement, they've met the requirement. There's no incentive to do any more work. And plus, they've got other things to do. So it's a disincentive for them to do any more. So legal compliance actually defines a narrow range of outcomes. Whereas self-interest is very, very critical. It's where we have a chance to make some difference in this issue. In Ontario, where I'm from, there's an organization, Hire Immigrants, and they've got a website, hireimmigrants.ca, and they put out a bunch of public service announcements that actually wound up on the TV for a while. I really like them, and there's one in particular I'd like to tell you about that I find most useful to explain what I mean by self-interest and costs and benefits to the employer. Picture 3 people. 2 of them are Canadians. 1 of them is an immigrant. They're sitting at a table and they're discussing a business problem. In this particular spot that they do, the immigrant happens to be a woman, and she's solving this very complex, difficult business problem by explaining to these 2 young men who are sitting with her what to do. She does it really, really well, very articulately, but with an accent, so we know that she's an immigrant. She's finished, she stands up, and we realize she's the cleaning lady. Okay? Now, what's supposed to happen there is that we're supposed to be outraged that a cleaning lady, this person's got an MBA, she's got this expertise, and you've hired her as a cleaning lady? That's the social justice angle. But let's look at that from another perspective. The way I look at it is, okay, you've got a person here who was not hired for their business expertise, solving a problem that 2 people that you hired for their business expertise couldn't solve. I see that as a cost to the employer. Now, when we hire people below their competency level or below their credentials, we call that sticky floors in my vernacular. And what it means is that they've been hired at a level that kind of prevents them from getting beyond that level because their skills and competencies and abilities are not being recognized. That's a cost to the employer, not only because of the increase in lost productivity that I just described, but also because they often leave. They either get fired or they quit. And that creates a huge cost to the employer. So self-interest is a key component. Now, Sounds like this would be a good place to stop, except that we need to make change still. I've maybe motivated you, I've given you a very good business case for doing it, but how to actually make that change. I think this is where a lot of people sort of fall down, because what they don't realize is that to make that change requires much more substantial thinking and doing than we usually give it credit for. Because these are behaviors that we want to change, and these behaviors have been learned early, they've been repeated, they've been passed through generations, they've been reinforced. We get rewarded for them when they're done well, we get penalized when we don't do them well. So we learn them, they become automatic. That's how we do things around here. So, what we need to understand is that we need to move beyond that awareness thing. I've just brought you to the awareness thing. You're going, oh yeah, we need to take care of that. However, what we also need is knowledge and skills. And we need skills that will allow us to change now, make small changes now, practice with them, learn them, get used to them, and then we need to practice mindful actions so that we actually get those new behaviors into the place where they are normal, automatic, as our current behaviors are. Let me give you an example. Driving home from work. How many of us drive home from work automatically without any thought? We turn, we don't even think about turning on the turn signal. You wouldn't be able to tell somebody if you had turned on the turn signal because it's so automatic. You know you did, but you can't remember actually doing it. You go home the same way every day, and you do it day after day. You learn how to do it. You don't think about it anymore. What if you move or change jobs? That route has to change. So then what do you have to do? Well, then you're going to do some Googling. You might test out some different ways to get there. You test out it at different times of day to see what the best ways are to get there. You might develop a different set of ways to get there depending on the time of day or the weather or how you feel, what car you're driving, whatever. So that's the knowledge and skills portion where you're developing those techniques and those new skills. You've got to find the right ways, the ways that work for you. There may be 27 different ways to get to your home. There are only 3 or 4 maybe that work for you. Then you need to do that over and over and over until the new way of getting home from work becomes your natural way of going home from work and you don't think about it anymore. So I think this slide pulls it all together for me. We want inclusive talent management. We want to change those talent management skills and abilities that managers have. But we need to recognize that it takes a lot more than just telling them this is what you need to do or why. We need to make sure we help them understand how they can do it and then give them the training that they need. And to understand that there are many, many pillars of this. I have 3 legs here for the stool because there's three cultures. Manager, employee, and the organization. The manager is only as powerful to change as the organization allows them to change. Now, I've also mentioned here, I've been talking about immigrants as people who have different cultures. But different cultures come from everywhere. So somebody coming into an organization, they might be from an older or younger generation. They might be someone with a disability. They might be Aboriginal. They might be a minority. They might be a woman. They might be someone from another industry where the industry is in decline, and they're bringing their transferable skills to your organization. All of those people will be coming with a different cultural orientation, and managers need to be able to pull out the best of those people by understanding that the way that we work doesn't work anymore. Thank you.